Morning, it's October 4th, and this is To My Liberal Friends, and it's a sad day. We can't stand winning, so we have to resort to losing, and that's the battle cry of the 8 Republicans who joined all the Democrats in ousting Kevin McCarthy as a Speaker of the House. Matt Gaetz, who never met a camera that he could not get in front of, led the charge against the Speaker and convinced his other 7 co-conspirators to vote against McCarthy. He filed the motion and then rounded up his other votes. The Democrats all smiled and went along with this fiasco because they can now actively campaign on the theme that the Republicans are in total disarray and cannot govern. Kevin McCarthy was one of the major architects of the Republican majority. He went out and campaigned for everybody. He raised millions of dollars. And this was a slim majority that, in my opinion, would have been much larger if Donald Trump and his minions, like Mr. Gaetz, had kept their mouths shut during the midterm elections. But Trump mobilized the Democratic base and proceeded to turn off independents and suburban women, forcing them to vote for Democrats. He won't admit it, and people like Gaetz and his cohorts were just as responsible. Now, before you look at this clown who masquerades as a conservative, you should know that his angst with McCarthy is very personal. Matt Gaetz has been the subject of an ethics committee investigation. Since the spring of 21, Mr. Gaetz has been under investigation over allegations he engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, shared inappropriate images or videos on the House floor, misused state identification records, converted campaign funds to personal use, and accepted impermissible gifts under House rules. Read that, he took a bribe. The secretive congressional investigation was paused while the Justice Department carried out a related investigation of Mr. Gaetz' conduct, including allegations involving sex trafficking and sex with a minor. In February, the Justice Department decided not to bring charges against Mr. Gaetz after concluding they just couldn't make a strong enough case to be sure they would win in court. Now, read that very carefully. It did not exonerate Mr. Gaetz. It just said they could not feel confident in getting a conviction on all the charges. One look at this pretty boy, and I think you get the feeling that he may well have been guilty. Mr. Gaetz made a big deal of the Justice Department dropping their investigation and tried to say all of the investigations were unsubstantiated. Once he learned of the resumed House investigation, Mr. Gaetz began complaining to some of his Republican colleagues about it and blaming Speaker McCarthy for allowing the investigation to proceed. He felt that McCarthy somehow had the power to end the investigation. The Ethics Committee, which is divided equally between Republicans and Democrats, is likely to write a report detailing its finding against Mr. Gaetz. And right now it's unclear how long that would take. The panel could recommend a range of punishments depending on what the facts its investigators uncover. But when they do, and if they find the charges are valid, then those who hitch their wagon to him will find themselves having to explain why they aligned themselves with someone like him. And being fully open, the charge about sex trafficking was about him having a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl. He also being investigated for sharing, as I said, those sexually explicit photos and videos on the House floor. The investigation was restarted in July, and I suspect that Mr. Gaetz may regret his current actions should the Ethics Committee come back with a report that's not favorable to him. He left a bitter taste in 96% of the Republican caucus, and they may move to expel him, and it would be poetic justice if that were to occur. On the floor, they complained that McCarthy broke his promise to them by passing legislation last week that did not pass with only a Republican majority. Does anyone see the hypocrisy of this complaint as they oust the Speaker with only 8 Republicans and the rest all Democrats? And the Democrats were more than happy, as I said, to help him show how chaotic they've made the Republicans in the House look. Now, in my opinion, Kevin McCarthy can hold his head high. He put the nation first by refusing to let his Gang of 8 shut down the government. He could have then turned to the Democrats and offered concessions for enough votes to remain Speaker, but he chose not to and put the Republican caucus above his personal feelings. And that's something Matt Gaetz will never do. The list of demands that Gaetz and his fellow idiots kept demanding are things that will never come to fruition with the Democratic Senate and Joe Biden in the White House. But they are an all or nothing bunch, and they will get nothing. McCarthy and more reasonable members realize they can get much of what they want by negotiating, but if they took a hard line and demanded everything, nothing would be accomplished. Whoever the new Speaker is, they should demand that insidious rule that allows one person to file a motion to vacate the chair be changed back to requiring a majority of the caucus, or at the very least 20 to 25 members. It would tell those brats to sit down and shut up, learn to behave and work within the caucus. You don't always get everything you want when government is divided. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, hit the subscribe button or recommend it to your friends.